He entered the art scene in good company, working with Joseph Beuys, Andy Warhol and Jean-Michel Basquiat. Thaddaeus Ropac went on to open galleries in Salzburg, Paris and now London. For 4 decades, the Austrian gallery owner and collector has been representing and exhibiting some of the most significant pieces made by living artists. And he's helped the contemporary art scene break out of its ivory tower. Thaddaeus Ropac, thank you so much for having us here in your gallery in the Marais in Paris. Now, you're showing work by American artist David Salle. And can you tell us a little more about what drew you to his work, his style, and how this selection fits into his career arc?
Well, David Salle is an artist who, he was one of the great artists who kind of brought painting back. And, he uses a lot of, imagery, which was already very strong within the art world of pop art, of American art of the 60s and 70s. But he mixes it in a totally different way. He brings it up to our time and, of course, to the feelings of our time back then in the 80s and continuously since then.
Well, the subject, so to speak, is actually the painting. They are images which can be painted. What matters is the way in which they're organized into a unified composition, which creates a kind of dynamic path for your eye. And the fact that there are multiple points of view or points of perspective or overlapping angles and so forth is just simply the way we actually all experience life to begin with.
Now, in addition to your galleries in Salzburg and here in Paris, you opened a space in London 3 years ago in May Fair. Now, you spent a while developing your spaces in France and in Austria before you branched out to the UK. Why was it so important for you to have an outpost there?
London was always a city which I kind of appreciated to go to and look at art there. There are some of the greatest museums in the world. There's a very active art world, art scene. Artists who really defined the 1990s and beyond. Young British artists really participated in a new idea of looking at art like no other movement almost at this period. So London has everything to be an incredible place for art. And it took me a long time to find the right space, but when we found Ely House in London, we felt this was the right surroundings. And we invited some of our artists to look at the space, and they all got very excited about it. And I thought it was the right time for us to come to London.
And I believe you started that project before the Brexit referendum, before the UK's exit from the European Union. How did that affect your thinking about the new gallery?
Yes, it's true. I think the decision for London was done before the referendum. I never thought it could happen. It just never even crossed my mind. Even when they were promoting Brexit, I thought, there is no way that London would go that far, or England would go that far. So it was a big surprise when it did happen. It changed the atmosphere, I have to say. London suffered, and the art world did suffer from this, and it will take some time that London reinvents itself or redefines itself first, But I'm not worried on the long run. I think it's just a period of finding the right balance and defending their place, and it has a very strong place in the art market, but not only in the market, but also in the art world per se, because there's a huge creative potential in London, which doesn't feed itself alone from English artists or British artists who live in London, but really also from international artists who are still drawn to London. So I would not be too worried about London, but it definitely gave a big boost to Paris. So in a way, being in Paris and in London is the best which could happen to us.
And indeed, current events, politics, news, wherever it happens in the world, sends ripples through the art market. Recently, we've seen a few galleries pull out of the Art Basel Fair in Hong Kong because of the volatility of the situation there. And as someone who necessarily operates in a very international world, how do you negotiate the ever-changing political and diplomatic landscape while you're doing your business?
I think it's important to watch it and to be aware of it. Often it is something which is temporary. We definitely would not pull out of Hong Kong, for instance. I think this is something which is hopefully temporary, this interruption, if it is an interruption. And sometimes, we have put a lot of energy into developing Asia, not only as a market, but also as a place our artists become known and get recognition. I would never consider pulling out of something because maybe for 1 year it will be difficult. It will be difficult to make this a commercial success, this edition, I think. But it will add a lot to make our artists still more known. And I think the participants of the art market there will really appreciate it.
And if we look at protest movements around the world, artists are often the first to speak out, but they're often the first to be censored by authoritarian regimes. How do you see their capacity to pass on their messages, that their artistic endeavors translate into something a bit more tangible, for example, in Asia or in Hong Kong?
Well, we have seen artists to be very outspoken, and it is sad to see that they have to live with the consequences. Censorship is something we are very sensitive to, and unfortunately we have seen censorship intensify in parts of Asia, and we were always used that it gets always easier and it's kind of became more open. Now we feel almost an opposite trend, and we are really sensitive to it and watching it very carefully. So this is something we are worried about, because if we are not able to show the artists the way they would like to be presented, and we have to think carefully what to show, and therefore we are blocking part of an artist's vision automatically if we have to start with us by selecting already something which is more safe. Often, as you say, artists are united in a certain statement, and still you have a large variety in how outspoken you need to be if you choose the way of Ai Weiwei, who kind of made an example of how outspoken an artist can be, how much impact he has with the way he does it. But there are many other ways.
Something from the world of contemporary art which hit the headlines recently, perhaps in a more amusing way, was linked to the sale of Maurizio Catalan's piece, Comedian, which sold for $120,000 in Miami recently, and has been described as a banana duct taped to a wall. Once it was sold, performance artist David Datuna ate it. Now, this sort of story is one that newspapers love. It gets a lot of attention, but also a lot of criticism. What do you think about these sort of stunts? Do you think they discredit the sector and make it an easy target for those who would say that performance art like that is perhaps a case of emperor's new clothes?
It is very easy to read it like this. It's always depending, who is the artist, what is, the overall work, and how does it fit in there. In this case, I can just really defend it, because I think it's a very serious artist who has developed his language and using it, in a way which is very precise. And it was a surprise, but not a total surprise, because it's still within his pattern. And, I'm very drawn to a great French artist of the 20th century, and I believe he's really one of the most important. It's Marcel Duchamp. And anything after Marcel Duchamp, it's difficult to really surprise and maybe shock. But I think this piece was very convincing, and it fits perfectly into I think, great artists' oeuvre.
The art market has changed enormously, as you point out, over the last 3 decades, not only from its international expansion, but also the logistics of it, how you do business. Looking ahead to the next 10, 20, 30 years, for you, what are the major challenges, the big issues that you're going to be dealing with in your sector?
I think, the way, artificial intelligence is really kind of pushing themselves into this creative process will change. It has the potential to change a lot. I think, there is a trend that art can be entirely experienced within a space you create on your computer, on your iPhone. There's a way also that people participate from different sides in this artificial space. I'm still a huge believer in the physical experience of art. So I still believe exhibitions are crucial, where an audience is invited into a space to look at art, which physically is in front of you. But this can, of course, be also a video projection or an installation. It doesn't need to be a painting on canvas. But this might change, and to react to this change, this is one of the great challenges.
Thaddaeus Ropac, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.